Let's take a look at section 4.5, Negative Exponents and Radicals. We're going to look at some vocabulary we need to remember and the basics of negative exponents. All right, some vocabulary we need to remember. We need to remember what a reciprocal is. If you go back into elementary math with fractions, you know that a reciprocal is just a fraction that has been switched around. So the reciprocal of 3 over 2 is 2 over 3. When we multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, we end up with 1 as our answer. 6 over 6 is 1. So the reciprocal of 3 over 2 is 2 over 3. You just swap the numerator and the denominator. Now, what's the reciprocal of just a whole number 2? Well, if you remember, the whole number 2 can be written as a fraction of 2 over 1. Therefore, the reciprocal of that will be 1/2. When we take 2 over 1 and we multiply it by 1 over 2, we get 2 over 2, which is equal to 1. So remind yourself what a reciprocal is. The next thing I want to show you, it's not written down here, is that you can break apart a negative number into -1 times +5. Every negative number can be broken down into this -1 times the positive of the number. So -4 is equal to -1 times +4. We're going to see why this is important later on. -1/2 is equal to -1 times 1/2. All right, so remember that you can do this fact. This makes sense to you. All right, let's take a look at the power to a power, the exponent law. If we have a power raised to an exponent here, we just multiply those two together. We've reviewed it in the last section. Well, hopefully you've reviewed it before this unit even started. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out, what does a negative exponent mean? Well, let's take a look at an example, a list. So let's take a look at the powers of 2. 2 to the power of 1 is equal to 2. 2 squared is equal to 4. 2 to the third power is equal to 8. 2 to the power of 0 is equal to 1. Any number to the power of 0 is equal to 1. In the last section, we learned that 2 to the 1/2 is equal to the square root of 2, which it slots in right in this area right here. So last section, we figured out what decimal exponents mean. This section, we're trying to figure out what negative exponents mean. Well, let's continue the patterns here. On the left-hand side, our pattern with our exponents is that it's getting smaller by 1 each time. So our next exponent in the line will be 2 to the -1. So if we're going to follow the pattern on the left side, we need to follow along the pattern on the right side. As we work our way up, 8 divided by 2 is equal to 4. 4 divided by 2 is equal to 2. 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1. So we must divide by 2 here. So we're going to get 0.5 for 2 to the -1. If we do 2 to the -2, we take our 0.5 and we divide it by 2 again, and we get 0.25. Now, this doesn't look so nice as decimals, but when we put in fractions, this is equal to 1/2, 1 divided by 2. This one's equal to 1 over 4. 2 to the -2 is equal to 1 over 4. Now, I want you to take a look at a couple here. 2 to the -2 is 1 over 4. 2 to the 2 is 4. So let's look at another pair. 2 to the 3 is 8. So what will 2 to the -3 be? 1 over 8. So it's just the reciprocal of the positive power. All right, so that's a long way to say that negative exponents give you the reciprocal of the positive exponent. All right, so let's take a look at to the power of negative 1. All right, 3 to the power of negative 1. Well, 3 to the power of negative 1 is the reciprocal of 3 to the power of 1, which is equal to 1 over 3. Okay, the negative tells you to take the reciprocal of it. We have 2/3 to the power of 1. Well, this will be equal to the reciprocal to the power of 1, which will be equal to 3/2. If it's just negative 1, if it's the power of negative 1, you take the reciprocal. All right, now I'm going to show you why that's kind of important here. All right, 9 to the power of negative 1/2. All right, so let's rewrite this out here. This is 9 to the power of negative 1 times 1/2. You remember we talked about that just before. Now what that means is I can do this. This is 9 to the negative 1 to the power of 1/2. Now 9 to the negative 1 is the reciprocal of 9. So this is 1 over 9 to the power of 1/2. Now 1/2 is the square root. So this is going to become square root of 1 divided by the square root of 9, which is equal to 1 over 3. Now that seemed like a lot of work. It was. All the steps should be familiar to you. And once you've done this a few times, you'll get the patterns down and you'll be able to do this without showing so much work. And sometimes it's easier to do the reciprocal at the end, right? I can write this the other way, 1/2 times negative 1. Then I do the square root first, then I reciprocal it. That's what we're going to do in the next one. So we've got 3/4 to the negative 5. So I can rewrite this as 3/4 to the minus 1 times 5. No, I lied here. I'm going to do the reciprocal first, and then we'll do the power of 5. So I can rewrite this guy as 3/4 to the power of negative 1 all to the power of 5. So that's equal to, the negative 1 tells me to do the reciprocal, 4/3. We've done the negative 1 to the power of 5, which is equal to 4 to the power of 5 over 3 to the power of 5. Now, both of those are big numbers that I don't know. I don't have my calculator out right now. I might need to get that out. All right, so an important note on parentheses. Are these two things the same? Well, the answer to that is no. Our first one here, this is going to be, the negative tells us to reciprocal it, so it's going to be 5 over 4 squared. All right, we just did the negative part. Now this is the way that you can start to think about it, do it faster. You can do the negative part, reciprocal it, and then finish with the rest of the power. And that we're going to get 25 over 16. Now in this question right here, the negative 2 only applies to the 4. So 4 over 5 to the negative 2. Well, that negative 2 only applies to the 4. So we are going to get 1 over 4 squared over 5, which is going to equal to 1 over 16 over 5. And what's 1 over 16 over 5? Well, quite simply, that's going to be 1 over 80. You can just kind of squish the denominators together and you get the answer, 1 over 80. These two are definitely not the same thing. Make sure you know about parentheses. Make sure that you use parentheses properly. Quick note on negatives and fractions. Negative 3 over 2 is the same thing as negative 3 over 2. Is the same thing as 3 over negative 2. All three of those fractions are the same. This first one is just the easiest one to kind of deal with. So if you ever have just a negative number over a positive number, bring the negative outside the fraction, put it in front, and that makes it easier to deal with. All right, if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the comments.